from the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
Today we have a very exciting subject to bring with you. All of our viewers throughout the Northwest and even in Canada, where you may not be familiar with this program, but you might be considering it in the future. A number of years ago, two businessmen who had traveled to South America came back to Arizona and came up with an exciting idea about children and how that could relate to voting in this country. We're going today to talk about something called Kids Voting USA. And on this program, we're happy to announce that Kids Voting is coming to Idaho, and we have three guests today that have been very instrumental in that happening. In Idaho, it will be called Kids Voting Idaho. It's my understanding that this is the 22nd state in this country to bring this program into being under the charter from the national organization, Kids Voting USA. I welcome to the program, first of all, Rick Clark, who is the editor of the North Idaho Business Journal, and we must give Rick full credit for bringing the idea to Idaho. He was in Arizona and observed, and his children participated in the program, and he got it started here. And next to him is Lori Barnes, who is now the executive director of Kids Voting Idaho, and I've worked with Lori on a number of projects, and you could not have a more efficient and effective executive director with her work in the past on other projects in her great detail. And next to her is Jim Thompson. We're very happy to announce that he is the chair of the board of directors of Kids Voting Idaho, and he is also the publisher of the Coeur d'Alene Press and the Business Journal of North Idaho. Lori and gentlemen, we're very happy to have you on the program. We look forward to talking about the inception of this program in our state. And as always, I'm very pleased to have Janelle Burke, who is a regular panelist, an attorney in the state of Idaho, and a law clerk for Judge Heyman. And I shall ask Janelle to commence our questioning.
Rick, you were one of the founders of this Kids Voting in Idaho. So can you tell us a little bit about how you learned about the program? And I know you learned about it in Arizona, but what happened? You probably had children who were observing that program at the time. What happened?
That's correct. It was in 1987. I was working for a newspaper in suburban Phoenix called the Mesa Tribune. The editor of that newspaper that year took a fishing trip to Costa Rica. It happened to be an election year, so he learned some interesting things about Costa Rica and their election process. He discovered that the people there, the Costa Rican people, are very proud of the fact that they have a free democracy, and they involve themselves very actively in the process. He learned that on election day, the government sponsors a mock election in which the children accompany their parents to the polls and have an election of their own in the actual polling place. And the results of that election are actually published before the results of the real election. So it creates a lot of excitement and a lot of enthusiasm. He also learned that Costa Rica typically has a voter turnout in the 80th and 90th percentile. So he assumed that the fact that the children went to the polls with their parents, that they made voting a family affair in Costa Rica, had to have something to do with the fact that they have such a terrific voter turnout. And of course he knew that Arizona, on the other hand, has typically a very poor voter turnout. So it was his idea to, in order to light the same kind of fire in Arizona that they have in Costa Rica, to establish a mock election for children. So when he returned, he created a nonprofit corporation called Kids Voting Incorporated, went to the corporate community to raise the money to fund the program. They implemented a curriculum in the schools to augment what the schools were already doing and to get the kids more involved in the voting process, more interested in the voting process. They had them go home and discuss the issues and the candidates with their parents. And then on election day, they held a mock election in the actual polling places in 68, I think, precincts in the Mesa Tribune's readership area.
I would like to ask our staff if they would show the banner that you brought with you. Here it goes. And Lori, maybe you would tell them a little bit about what this means.
That is the official, that's a national, kids voting, it's a national logo, and of course it says Idaho there because now Idaho is, as you said, the 22nd state to join it. So that will be a logo that hopefully people all over the state will become very familiar with.
And that they will see it. Janelle, would you like to continue your question?
And so, Jim, now you are the chairman of the board in Idaho. So can you tell us something about who all is involved? What schools are involved? Where have you gone so far with this?
Well, actually, we're just getting started involving the schools in Kootenai County in this process, and it's our goal to involve all of the schools in Kootenai County in the election this fall.
So what's going to be the election this fall, and how are you going to carry that out, sort of?
Well, it's going to be a local election, and it's a small step, but our first step to bring this program on board. As we communicated with Kids Voting USA, it was suggested to us as we started to grasp the scope of this process that we get into it first at a local election level.
Well, Lori, who do you contact? You're the executive director, and you're probably doing some of the groundwork, the footwork for this project. And so what do you do? What are your plans?
First you said, who do you contact? Well,
Yes.
there are three very important separate entities that have to be involved to make this program work. One, of course, is the schools, because
Yes.
the materials go through the schools, K through 12, all the classes study it, and it builds up, of course, to Election Day when they vote. The other two entities are the election officials. Obviously, to have the children going to the polling places on election days, they need to be involved. Though the election officials are doing it separately, when the kids come to the voting precinct, the adults go over and vote as they always do with your county people. The children go to a separate area, a separate room, a separate area in the main room, and do their voting there. So even though the election officials do not have any actual part in the program, of course they need to be on board. And then the third part, of course, is the community, because it's a community program privately funded by donations from the community. So we have business leaders, you have organizations like Rotaries, Kiwanis, Lions Clubs, PTO Alliance, groups like that throughout the community that will be involved. So it involves just about everybody.
Of course, then you need to have the children and their parents.
Exactly. And the key to it, as I think Jim and Rick both mentioned, is that it is a family. The children do not go vote with their teacher. They vote with their parents, with the family.
Now, what if you have a child who doesn't read yet? And I'm thinking now of first graders and so forth, and they're looking at the ballot, and there are some names that are rather complicated on there. How does that work?
The
Lori, how
ballots,
did you tell us?
actually, they use pictures.
Oh,
And you will see at the lower grades they have the pictures, and then as they get up more sophisticated to where at the upper levels it's the actual ballot that they're working on. So the concepts are very similar through all the grades. I live in a democracy. I have a right to vote. My vote counts. And they're just taught at different levels of sophistication.
And when the teachers approach these questions or approach who shall we vote for, I assume they're going to talk about it in class, and they're going to. How does the child make a decision as to who they want to vote for? Do they know where the candidates stand on the issues? Is that part of it?
The main thing that the teachers are really teaching them is how to gather information, how to understand the information you have gathered, and then how to make a decision. The teacher does not give them any actual information on a candidate. The assignment might be, go home and talk to your parents. Who's running for governor? Maybe their homework is to find out who is running for governor. And then the students bring that information back. And so again, the information from the schools is simply how to gather in the information, how to decipher it, and then how to make the decision.
Lori, to follow up on that a little bit more, obviously there's a curriculum and it's well developed, and you've been explaining that, and the teacher will work with the students. Now, how do you build a bridge from that to the home to get the parents to cooperate? Do the students themselves do that, or do you have any direct contact with the families?
A lot of it is homework. Again, that they need to go home and research things and discuss things. And I think, as you remember, the last election that we just had, we had, what, Tony, 8 initiatives on the ballot? And I know that many people ended up going to the polls and spending 20 minutes in there because it's the first time they had seen it. Well, if your child's homework is to study the things that you're going to be voting on, guess what? The parents are probably going to become more informed too. And that has been one of the side benefits that I don't know if the original people really thought. Originally it was to teach the children how to vote, but they have found that in the areas that this program is working, the parents say that they are better informed. So it's sort of an added plus that we did not plan for in the beginning.
Jim?
And yeah, it begs to add more. We talk about teaching the children to vote, but I think it goes way beyond that to share with them the importance of voting and the responsibility that goes with it, and the responsibility that goes with not voting. You have to live by what other people accomplish in their voting process. So this is an enlightenment. I like to think of it that it's going to reawaken. We hope to, across the nation, reawaken an interest in the value of voting and governing yourself.
Rick, as all of you know, this takes a lot of volunteers. It takes money because, as Lori's already said, the regular election officials are not responsible for setting up the booths and the ballots. Tell us how it is planned in Idaho, particularly in the Coeur d'Alene area where it's the pilot project. How are you going to put all this together about each precinct and how you get volunteers and how you finance that process?
Well, we are going out into the community, to civic groups, to businesses. The response already has been very, not only positive, but very exciting. What we're doing is we're asking primarily civic groups and businesses to adopt a precinct, to take charge and be responsible for operating the kids voting ballot boxes at that precinct. Kootenai County Clerk Tom Taggart has told us that in this fall's election there will be 50 precincts, an increase of about 20, I believe, from what there is now, to better accommodate the voters. And he's doing what he can to, ahead of time, to arrange for the students to come in and avoid any kind of traffic congestion or anything like that.
By spreading them out, that makes it, some precincts have gotten very large and there are congestions.
Mm-hmm.
When you say that an organization can adopt a precinct, there's two ways that can happen, is it not? For a sum of money, they can adopt a precinct to help get this whole thing off of the to a start, and then number two, they can also adopt a precinct by volunteers.
That's correct. And like you point out, Tony, there's both financial need and manpower needs, and we're trying to satisfy both those needs by giving businesses the opportunity to do either one or both, actually. They can adopt a precinct with a $500 donation, or they can offer the use of their employees, or they can do both.
And then from the opening at 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., that particular children's precinct has to be there with volunteers all the time, just like the regular
Correct.
Voting. Jim, I'd like to move in a little bit another area with you as the chair of the board of directors for the Kids Voting Idaho. You have a board of directors and you have an executive board also. What is the role of this organization, not only in the Coeur d'Alene area, but for the whole state? What do you envision as happening with this? And I understand there's a difference between 95 when we have city elections and 1996 when it'll really be an undertaking with the presidential election.
Well, Tony, the process here in Kootenai County, like you say, first is to get the first election under our belt here in Kootenai County. But our role as the license holder for Kids Voting Idaho means that we have the responsibility of also establishing a state board of directors and making Kids Voting USA available to other communities in Idaho, and there are several that have already expressed an interest. Boise and Lewiston are really pushing to see how they can get involved. And it'll be our responsibility to administer Kids Voting USA to the other cities and or voting areas within Idaho. So, and we're moving very quickly to get that done. We were hoping to get one of the election processes under our belt so we'd be more familiar with our responsibilities to those other communities, but we have already established a timeline to start making the information about Kids Voting USA available to those other communities and give them an opportunity to get involved and help form the state board that we'll need to put together.
And something we haven't said that's really important, and I know that but the board of directors reflect this, and it's in part of the charter nationwide. This involves a nonpartisan approach, and it's not to favor either political party or any candidates in that process.
Yeah, absolutely. That just is not part of the curriculum at all. I think that is one of the exciting parts about the curriculum. It's what got me interested. You talk about Kids Voting USA and you wonder a little bit of what it's about. When I seen the adaptation of some of the curriculum, I just jumped on board. It's interesting, even at an elementary school level, how the curriculum helps show the importance of voting, and I just think that everybody that gets an opportunity to view that is going to climb on board with Kids Voting USA.
Lori?
A real quick example of that, if I could, the lower grade levels, like kindergarten through 3rd or 4th, the kids are given a sheet of paper and they're told to vote on it. That's all they're told. Then it says ice cream, recess, homework, TV. Well, you can guess, most kids vote yes for recess, no for homework, yes for ice cream, yes for TV. The teacher collects the ballots, they tally it up, then she gives them another ballot. This one says that the only ice cream they get will be garlic flavored. Recess will be replaced by 20 minutes of push-ups. Homework will be every night, even weekends. Now all of a sudden they want to change their vote. The lesson that is learned very, very simply is I need information before I vote. And then the other lesson that is learned, I have to live by the consequence of the vote, and then they eat garlic ice cream. And so they're learning in a very fun, simple way, again, the basic concepts of living in a democracy. It's a lot of fun, a lot of fun.
One final question before we go to Janelle for Rick on that very point. Rick, when you were looking at this in Arizona, it's such a great teaching tool to advocate that individuals or even children research before they make a decision. Did they see that impact with the parents when the parents started watching the children and the research? I know that your numbers, you already said, it increases the number of adults who go out and vote, but does it also increase the work that they do prior to voting?
Absolutely. They did some surveying, some research after that pilot program in Arizona, and they found two things they found was that obviously voter turnout was 5% higher in the kids' voting precincts than anywhere else in the state. But more importantly, as you're saying, the parents indicated that they felt they were more informed as voters than they had been before. Many of the parents offered that they had never voted before in their lives. For them, kids voting was the first time they'd ever voted. So the results were real exciting.
And you're seeing that all over other places that adopted. Janelle Burke.
Well, I want to come right back to you, Rick, and ask you also to give us a personal example of how this works. Before the show, I was asking you if you had children who were involved in this program, and can you give us some personal feedback, how that works?
Well, it was a fun experience for my family, and it generated much more conversation around the dinner table. We learned a lot of things about them, about our children, and they learned a lot of things about us. The experience of taking your own children to the polls, I know a lot of people do that, make that a practice anyway. I never had, and it was real rewarding for me to do that. I felt it was real important. I could tell that it was an important experience for them. Another exciting experience I had that first year in Arizona was I was covering the program as a reporter. And as a reporter, like most reporters are, I was pretty skeptical at first. But when you see the excitement that the program generates in the community among parents and teachers and children and business people, and the momentum that it gains prior to Election Day, you just can't help but also get excited and buy into it. And on election morning, the polls in Arizona open at 6 a.m. And on election morning, it was my duty to go out and find a polling place and report on what it was like there with the children, right? And I dragged myself out of bed and then in the pre-dawn light drove to a polling place and arrived to find the polls hadn't quite opened yet. I was there about 5 minutes ahead of time. I arrived to find a line of children from the doors all the way back to the parking lot. Some of them still in their pajamas, holding stuffed animals. They were so excited to be a part of that program. And that leaves a lasting impression on you. And then the looks on their faces when they went into the polling place was unforgettable.
They must feel very grown up.
They do. They feel that they're very special and that it's a very important experience.
And privilege.
Mm-hmm.
Well, before the program, we were talking just a little bit, Jim and Lori and Rick, but particularly Jim and Lori, about young people right after they graduate from high school, the number of people who vote in that 18 to 25 age group. Lori, I believe you had some statistics. Can you tell our viewing audience what percentage of people vote in that particular age group? And then, Jim, if you could follow up on how you think that the program might help that age group to keep voting if they start doing it when they're children and then proceed into those years, how it might improve the percentage of people who vote in that age group. But Lori, starting with you, about how many do vote in that age group?
I don't have the exact numbers, but Idaho is very good as far as having voter participation. But what we have seen is that the 18 to 24-year-olds is very low. I think it's under 20%, very low percentage of those. And so what this program is trying to do is instill that habit when they're young to where it is an actual habit. By the time they graduate, some of these children will have already actually gone to the polls and voted 4 or 5 times by the time they graduate. And so, and I think that what you said, a privilege, a right, a responsibility, I think we've seen that every generation since the people that had to actually fight and put their lives on the line for the right to vote, we're losing a little bit of the passion for it. I mean, we know in our minds, yes, I should go vote, but it's not that passion. And I think that we can create that in the next generation coming up, that love, that privilege, that passion for this democracy, and that's what we're trying to do.
Jim, do you think that's going to work to keep young people involved if they get started by practicing?
Yeah, I sure do. I think that the first time to do anything is the hardest time, and we keep talking about kids voting as part of a curriculum for school, but it's important to point out that when they go out and vote, they go out and vote as citizens. They go to the polling place. They've gone through the process, and that'll make it that much easier for them to get involved in an adult election the same way. But at the same time, I think through the process and the curriculum, they're going to have a better understanding of the value of voting. Kids Voting USA is the way we set up the licensing for Idaho's chapter will first be brought to Kootenai County, and of course it's our goal to bring that to all of the students in Idaho. And but we won't be able to do that without the participation from other communities, from leaders and businesses in other communities that'll be able to come forth and help finance this privately funded endeavor.
So if people are interested who are out there right now, there are 2 things. The parents who might be interested and have children, they should be watching for that to happen if you're in the Kootenai County schools next year. But we have a much broader viewing audience, and so if there are people out there who are interested who are in other states or in Idaho elsewhere, what can they do? Can they contact you, Jim and Lori, as an executive director and find out where to go?
Yeah, they could certainly contact me at our business office, Coeur d'Alene Press, but we have, through our executive director, Lori, an office and a phone number that they can get in touch with us at, and
667-3002.
Why would I know that?
Did you get, Lori, I can just sense someone with a pen. They didn't get that. So first of all, if they're out of state and they're inquiring about what we're doing here, they would need to call area code 208 and then 667
3002.
3002.
Right.
And I want to make sure that our viewers feel comfortable that they got that. We just have such little time, and we're going to have you back in the fall of this year, 95, and we'll take a look at how are things in place for the city elections. But Lori, would you take us a little bit through that? Now, some young people will not get to vote, and some parents will not get to vote in 95 because they don't live in an incorporated city, because we were looking at the race and just for certain city offices. Would you contrast that with 1996, when we'll be in full swing from the local level all the way through Congress and the presidency?
Yeah, and again, like Jim pointed out, the reason we are starting now, even though the 95 election is not obviously as big of an election, that's the reason why, because 96 is a big election. We want to get our feet wet, get it under our belt, get the thing organized. So, and again, remember the voting day is, of course, the culmination of it, but what they're learning in school building up to that is also very, very important. those decision-making skills. And one thing we had not mentioned yet, Tony, that I wanted to make sure we did bring up is that their votes are tabulated. When you mentioned, Janelle, that they feel important. On the news at night, most likely their votes will be told first, because we can start counting their votes up earlier. And their votes will be tabulated right alongside the parents. And in areas where I've talked to other people, their kids are so excited to see. Did the same person win that the kids voted for as the parents? And it is not always that way. The kids do not necessarily mimic the same vote as their parents. So this election is treated just as serious as far as tabulating and getting the results of the votes out as is the adult election.
I think that's what Rick was referring to when they knew that would happen and they were very proud. Jim?
I think I've got this right. In the last presidential election, Kids Voting USA, the kids actually would have elected a different president.
That's right, yeah. In different areas it was interesting. There were, I think, 18 states in the 1994 election. Over 3 million children went to the polls with their parents and voted. That is just incredible. And by the 1996, it looks like all 50 states will be on board. Right now, we're the 22nd state, but it's almost every month, every 2 or 3 months, another state's coming on. So it could very easily be nationwide by the time we get to 1996.
We can underscore another point. That's kind of my field in political science, looking at numbers. And in Europe, the voting is so much better than the United States. Laura, you referred to this earlier. And as you said, if we go back to the earlier part of the century when women got the right to vote, and if you go back to the Civil War and all those things, the voting has really declined in the last 30 or 40 years, which is very serious to democracy. It's certainly better in the Pacific Northwest than anywhere else in the United States, but even here, there's a lot of people who don't vote. And there's 2 ways of looking at that. You can look at registered voters, or all of those that are potential voters that don't register, and it's below 50% if you look at all potential voters. So my question then back to Rick would be, as we said at the beginning of this program, we know that it increases. Is there any information from the national organization over a period of time when all 50 states do it? Could we anticipate even a greater increase in adult voting than even the numbers have shown from these first years in states like Arizona?
I haven't seen that kind of information, but that's the assumption, is that as the program progresses, that the results will just be better and better.
Lori, I got the signal we have 1 minute left. Do you have any other message that you'd like to share with the people of Idaho and even other states before we go off the air?
We are just so excited about it. And again, if anyone wants more information on it, it's something that we need. It's a community program, so everyone will be involved.
I thank all 3 of you very much on behalf of Janelle Burke and our staff. We will invite you back, and congratulations on this program. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you will find this of great interest and that you will contact them about this idea. And we invite you to be with us again next week when we will discuss yet another issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Instructional Technology on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.